The more they know about you, the more power they think they have over you. Silence isn't secrecy, it's strategy. There is a kind of power that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't post updates. It doesn't live for validation. It moves in silence and builds in the dark. And that kind of power is only possible when privacy becomes your priority. In a world addicted to exposure, withholding becomes your edge. The less they know, the less they can influence, distort, or disrupt. Privacy is not about isolation. It's about intelligent protection. People misunderstand privacy. They think if you're private, you're hiding. No, when you're private, you're preserving. When you're private, you're protecting what matters most: your peace, your purpose, and your process. Power doesn't leak. It doesn't beg to be noticed. It doesn't live on display. Power is concentrated energy, and every time you overshare, you dilute your own momentum. See, the more people know about your personal life, your strategies, your struggles, your relationships, your next move, the more access they have to manipulate your narrative. Some will misunderstand you, others will misrepresent you, and some will intentionally use what they know to block what you're building. This is not paranoia. It's preparation, because anyone who's ever built anything valuable knows that silence is a part of the strategy. Privacy is protection. It protects your vision from premature judgment. It shields your healing from commentary. It guards your relationships from confusion. Some things cannot grow in public. Some breakthroughs require stillness, darkness, and solitude. Ask any gardener. You don't expose the seed on day one and expect it to grow. You bury it, you water it, you guard it from harsh weather, and only after time, strength, and root development does it rise. The same is true for your personal life. Every detail doesn't belong in public spaces. Every relationship doesn't need public approval. Every plan doesn't need outside opinions, because the moment you let too many people in, you start shrinking your own voice to make room for theirs. Now you're editing your decisions based on their perception. Now you're hesitating, not because you're unsure, but because you're overstimulated by outside voices. That's what exposure does. It fragments your focus and scatters your strength. Privacy allows you to stay rooted in truth before public pressure demands a performance. When people don't know your every move, you're free to pivot, to grow, to fail, and to evolve without external noise. You don't owe the world a front row seat to your process. Not everyone deserves access to your evolution. You want to walk in real power. Start moving in quiet authority. You don't have to prove your purpose to people who haven't paid the price for your process. The minute you stop needing to be understood is the minute you start becoming unstoppable. People can't attack what they don't see. They can't block what they don't expect. They can't copy what they don't know. You want to preserve your edge, protect your privacy. Privacy creates a sacred space where clarity is born. When you're not constantly explaining, defending, or updating, your mind becomes sharper. Your decisions become clearer. Your energy becomes more focused. You get to operate from a position of strength, not stress, from security, not scrambling. The people who truly win long-term understand the difference between exposure and elevation. Exposure gets attention. Elevation builds legacy. Exposure is addictive, but elevation is intentional. And if you're serious about legacy, about building something that lasts, about walking in divine power, you must be willing to keep some things to yourself. You must be willing to disappear from the noise to become what only silence can shape. There's a reason the most powerful forces in the world, gravity, wind, time, are invisible. You can't see them, but their impact is undeniable. Likewise, the most powerful people don't always announce their plans, but their results speak volumes. When your results are loud, your mouth doesn't have to be. Let your work be your voice. Let your success be your explanation. Let your silence be your strength. When you become a fortress, you stop leaking potential. You stop explaining your calling to people who haven't even discovered their own. You stop adjusting your energy to fit into spaces you've already outgrown. You begin to understand that some moments in life are too sacred for display. Some transitions are too holy for commentary. Some blessings are too fragile to survive the opinions of others. Not everyone who's watching you is rooting for you. Some are waiting to discredit you. Some are silently comparing themselves to you. Some are only interested in your process so they can plagiarize the steps without respecting the sacrifice. And that's why your privacy isn't selfish, it's strategic. You're not being distant, you're being discerning. The world will always ask for more of you, more access, more vulnerability, more information. But it is your job to set the boundary, to say, not everything about me belongs to everyone. Not because I'm hiding, but because I'm honoring the sacred parts of my life, the parts that are still in progress, the parts that are not yet ready for public consumption, the parts that are being healed, refined, strengthened. And when you live this way, when you treat your privacy as sacred, you don't lose anything, you gain everything, you gain peace, you gain clarity, you gain alignment, and ultimately you gain power, because privacy doesn't subtract from your life. It multiplies your impact. Every word you speak is a seed, and the wrong soil can twist its growth. Oversharing doesn't always invite support. More often, it invites scrutiny, suspicion, and subtle sabotage. The idea that telling people everything about yourself makes you authentic is a myth. What it actually does is create room for people to misread your meaning, misquote your intent, and misunderstand your identity. You might think you're being open. You might think you're being transparent. But the truth is, every time you give someone access to your story without discernment, you give them the power to reshape it in their mind. And what they repeat is often far from what you intended. You were venting. They called it complaining. You were reflecting. They called it regret. You were sharing a vision. They called it unrealistic. You were revealing a weakness to heal. They called it evidence to discredit you. People don't hear what you say. They hear what their mind filters, their trauma, their jealousy, their biases, their fears. All of that gets woven into your words. And suddenly, your story becomes something you no longer recognize. That's the cost of oversharing. The moment it leaves your mouth, it's no longer yours. It becomes a distorted mirror reflecting back their own issues, not your truth. We live in a time where people confuse access with intimacy, where storytelling is monetized, and where secrets are entertainment. In such a culture, oversharing isn't just risky, it's dangerous. Every detail you give becomes a data point for people to make assumptions, predictions, and judgments. They start to put you in boxes you never built. They define your identity based on snapshots, not substance. And worse, they spread versions of your story that aren't rooted in your reality. You must understand that your words are powerful, and when they're handled carelessly by the wrong people, they can become weapons. Sometimes the enemy doesn't need to attack you directly. He just needs to twist your own words, replayed through insecure minds. That's how reputations are ruined. That's how trust is broken. That's how doors close before you even know they existed. Because someone misunderstood something you never meant to be public in the first place. Oversharing doesn't just distort how others see you, it distorts how you see yourself. The moment you get caught up in explaining, defending, and clarifying your every move, you start to doubt your own discernment. You start asking, did I say too much? Did they understand what I meant? Did I make a mistake by opening up? That's mental clutter. That's emotional chaos. That's the fruit of giving away pieces of yourself to people who were never qualified to carry them. Every time you overshare, you put your healing at risk. Healing requires a safe environment. It requires trust. It requires sacred space. But when you pour your private wounds into public ears, you don't get healing. You get feedback. And feedback from the wrong source can infect what was trying to be restored. It's not that you can't talk. It's that you must be strategic about where you speak, how you speak, and to whom you speak. Not every listener is a safe container. Some people are leaky vessels. They take what you tell them and spill it everywhere, not to help you, but to make themselves feel important. Others are broken containers. They distort your message because their own lives are so fractured that they can't hold clarity. And some are locked vaults, yes, but those are rare, and they're earned, not assumed. Even with good intentions, people can't help but misread. You may be in a season of reflection, and they'll label it depression. You may be growing in silence, and they'll call it distance. You may be working through old wounds, and they'll say you're unstable. You may be grieving a loss, and they'll say you're weak. That's what happens when you open your heart to ears that are not tuned to your frequency. Discernment must govern your expression, not fear, not shame. Wisdom, because wisdom says, I can share my truth without giving away my process. Wisdom says, I can be vulnerable, but I don't have to be exposed. Wisdom says, I don't have to post it to process it. You don't owe anyone a front row seat to your development. Some things are between you, your journal, your God, and the few who have proven themselves worthy. You see, when you keep certain things private, you protect their purity. You allow your thoughts to mature before they're dissected. You allow your emotions to settle before they're misread. You allow your progress to stabilize before it's evaluated. That's not hiding. That's honoring your own journey. The truth is, people are going to judge you no matter what. But oversharing gives them more ammunition. You're not responsible for their opinions, but you are responsible for the access you grant. Protecting your voice is not selfish. It's wise stewardship. You are not obligated to be an open book to a world that only skims pages and skips context. Let people wonder, let them guess, let them fill in the blanks. What they think about you is not your assignment. Your assignment is to guard your energy, protect your process, and grow in peace. Because when you speak prematurely, you may satisfy curiosity, but you sacrifice clarity. And when you live to be understood, you will never experience the power of simply being whole. Oversharing might feel good in the moment, but clarity and peace are long-term rewards of discretion. If they're not your mentor, your spiritual guide, or your inner circle, they don't need to know your next move, your deepest thought, or your latest struggle. Let your silence speak. Let your results respond. And let your power stay protected by your privacy. The more access you give the public, the more you invite unseen warfare. You may think you're being generous, open, and transparent, but in reality, you're handing out keys to people who have no intention of protecting what's behind the door. Public access might gain you applause, but it will cost you something far more valuable: peace, privacy, and personal safety. The truth is, not everyone who sees you clapping for yourself wants you to win. Some are studying your joy to find your weakness. Some are watching your elevation to scheme your downfall. That's why access must be earned, not given. People love to observe what they don't understand, but they also love to attack what makes them feel inadequate, and often It's not your mistakes that attract criticism, it's your success, the way you carry your confidence, the way you move without asking for permission, the way you're healing, building, growing, and walking in purpose. That's what threatens people who have not done the work within themselves. They see you as a mirror, not a person, and instead of dealing with their own reflection, they choose to target yours. When you open yourself up to the world without boundaries, you expose parts of your life that were never meant for general consumption. You make sacred things vulnerable. You allow unqualified people to speak on things they can't even comprehend. And worst of all, you give the enemy a front row seat to study your patterns, your relationships, your routines, your highs and your lows. Now he knows how to interrupt your peace without even lifting a finger. He'll just use people. Public access breeds private attacks because not everyone engages with you in public with the same energy they carry in private. Some people celebrate you in the comments but curse you in their group chats. They repost your wins while secretly hoping you fall off. They ask questions like they care, but they're only gathering information. And because you made yourself accessible, they didn't even have to work for it. You gave them everything they needed to aim in the dark. You can't control how people think, but you can control what they have access to. Every time you overshare your process, your plans, or your problems, you invite perspectives that aren't aligned with your assignment. You give entry to people who haven't earned trust, and in doing so, you lower the gate on your spiritual, emotional, and mental security. Not all attacks come in the form of criticism. Some are wrapped in false concern. Some sound like praise but are laced with comparison. Some appear as questions but are seeded with manipulation. Your piece is not up for public review. Your process is not public property. And your personal life is not a storyline for someone else's entertainment. But the more you feed the public with details, the more they begin to believe they're entitled to them. And when you withhold, they accuse you of changing. When you set boundaries, they call you secretive. When you protect your growth, they say you're distant. Why? Because public access created a false sense of relationship. And now that you're guarding your space, they feel rejected by your elevation. Let me be clear, everything sacred must be protected. Every seed must be buried before it blooms. If you keep planting your future in public soil, don't be surprised when strangers trample it, not because they hate you, but because they don't know how to value what they didn't pay for. When you give the public too much access, you invite attacks not just on your name, but on your mind, your mission, and your movement. Many of the wounds people carry didn't come from enemies. They came from open doors. Doors they left unguarded in the name of being liked, in the name of staying relevant, in the name of appearing real. But authenticity without boundaries is vulnerability without covering. And that's how private attacks begin. When you expose a wound to people who only want to watch it bleed, not help it heal, you've got to know the difference between being seen and being safe. Just because the spotlight is on you doesn't mean you're protected. And just because people are watching doesn't mean they're for you. Some people clap because it's polite, not because it's genuine. Some people follow because they're curious, not because they're committed. Don't confuse attention with alliance. Visibility can make you famous, but it can also make you a target. The enemy uses exposure as a strategy. He waits for you to let your guard down. He waits for you to start talking too much, posting too much, revealing too much. And then he whispers lies into the ears of people who already wrestle with jealousy. He fuels their insecurities and uses your openness as ammunition. Now you're confused why the energy shifted. Now you're wondering why a trusted friend is suddenly distant. Now you're blindsided by betrayal you never saw coming. It didn't start with the betrayal. It started with the access. The level of attack you experience is often equal to the level of exposure you've allowed. If you want to reduce the noise in your life, reduce the access. You don't need to explain your every move. You don't need to showcase every win. You don't need to advertise every blessing. Some things are safer in silence. If you're building something sacred, be it your peace, your family, your business, your healing, keep the door closed until it's ready. Let your fruit speak for you. Let your results answer the questions. Let your quiet moves make the loudest impact, because when the public can't trace you, they can't trap you, and when access is limited, attacks lose their aim. There's a power that comes from being unknown, an authority that flows from restraint. When people can't figure you out, they respect you more. When they don't know your next move, they watch you with curiosity, not entitlement. There's something magnetic about mystery, something sacred about silence. And the moment you begin to realize that not everything about you needs to be explained, broadcasted, or exposed, is the moment you start walking in a different kind of influence. In a world where everyone is shouting for attention, silence becomes a strategy. When people can't predict you, they have to pause. When they can't box you in, they're forced to take you more seriously. There's a reason why leaders, legends, and legacy builders don't operate out loud. They've learned that what's hidden has power, what's concealed has potential, and what's mysterious has leverage. You don't have to be mysterious to manipulate. You become mysterious to multiply your value. Think about it. People don't chase what they easily understand. They chase what's just out of reach, what's layered, what's quiet, what's deeply rooted but rarely explained. The human mind is drawn to what it can't fully grasp. That's why mystery elevates your presence. It forces people to listen closer, watch longer, and approach you with caution and curiosity. That's respect, that's honor, and that's power. Mystery creates space between you and the world. And that space isn't distance. It's dignity. When people think they know everything about you, they start handling you casually. They speak too freely. They assume too quickly. But when you are selective with your speech, your access, and your emotions, people tread more carefully. Not out of fear, but out of reverence, because what is rare becomes respected. What is protected becomes priceless. What is not easily accessed becomes deeply valued. Most people are too addicted to being understood. They want to explain their every move, prove their every point, and be accepted by everyone in the room. But the need to be understood often robs you of your uniqueness. It flattens you. It makes you easier to dismiss, easier to define, and once people define you, they stop discovering you. They stop asking questions. They stop leaning in. But when you keep certain things sacred, you keep the mystery alive. You keep people searching. You keep them engaged. And that keeps your influence intact. Respect isn't given to those who reveal everything. Respect is given to those who know when to speak and when to remain still, when to show and when to conceal, when to be visible and when to disappear. The one who controls their exposure controls their impact. You don't need to explain why you do what you do. The fruit will eventually speak. The outcomes will echo louder than your words ever could. But if you waste your time trying to explain to everyone, you'll drain your energy trying to maintain their understanding. Mystery protects your momentum. When people don't know your next step, they can't interfere. They can't interrupt. They can't imitate or sabotage. Some of your greatest progress will come in the seasons where no one knows what you're working on. In those moments of silence, you're free to pivot without commentary, free to experiment without judgment, free to evolve without being watched. That freedom births excellence. That freedom gives you room to create with power. You don't need to be loud to be impactful. You don't need to post it to prove it. You don't need everyone clapping for your journey. if you're walking with purpose. Let people wonder how you keep winning. Let them try to figure out why you're unbothered. Let them question how you're growing with so much grace and clarity. You don't owe them an answer, because when you embrace mystery, you elevate your energy. You stop chasing respect and start commanding it. The quiet ones are often the deepest waters. They carry wisdom others overlook. They walk into rooms and shift atmospheres without speaking a word. Why? Because they're not common. They're not obvious. They've mastered themselves in private, so when they show up, they don't need to announce it. Their presence is the announcement. Their restraint is the proof of their power, and their mystery, that's what keeps people leaning in. You don't have to be fake. You don't have to pretend. You just have to stop giving everyone all of you. Save some parts for yourself. Save some parts for your future, for your legacy, for the people who truly earn the right to know the depth of your story. Because not everyone who watches you values you. Not everyone who listens understands, and not everyone who claps is for you. Mystery multiplies respect because it forces people to evaluate, not consume. You're not here to be easily figured out. You're not here to be everyone's favorite. You're here to walk in power, purpose, and presence. And power doesn't scream. Power doesn't explain. Power doesn't chase validation. It moves with confidence in silence and lets the world catch up, if it ever can. So hold your story with honor, share when it's time, speak when it serves purpose, but never feel obligated to open your life to eyes that only want to observe, not honor. Let the mystery of your silence speak louder than the noise of their assumptions, because when you keep them wondering, you keep them respecting. Your truth is sacred. It's heavy. It's forged in your deepest moments of pain, clarity, transformation, and awakening. But here's the reality most people don't want to admit. Not everyone has the emotional maturity, the spiritual discernment, or the personal integrity to carry the weight of that truth. Some people are too shallow to understand it. Some are too insecure to receive it, and some are too toxic to handle it without turning it into a weapon. There's a cost to opening up, and it's not just vulnerability, it's discernment, because when you share deep truth with shallow people, they drown in the depth you live in daily. They'll call your growth arrogance. They'll call your process drama. They'll reduce your healing to a story they can mock or misinterpret. Why? Because they never did the work. And when someone hasn't carried their own truth, they'll never honor the weight of yours. You have to stop expecting everyone to clap for what cost you everything to carry. Some people will never see the strength it took to survive what you never spoke out loud. They only see the fragments that surface, and they judge the surface without knowing the war that raged beneath it. You can't make someone understand a journey they never walked. You can't expect people who live on the surface to comprehend the pressure of living with depth. And the danger is, when you share too soon with the wrong ears, you don't get connection. You get distortion. They twist your intent. They mishear your heart. They turn your honesty into gossip. And instead of walking away healed, you walk away misunderstood. That's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to learn from it. Wisdom isn't silence. Wisdom is selective speech. It's knowing when to speak, how much to say, and to whom it should be said. You can't give sacred information to people who haven't proven they know how to honor sacred spaces. Some people can't even hold their own secrets. What makes you think they can hold yours? Your truth has a weight because it's attached to your becoming. It holds the lessons, the battles, the breakthroughs, and the revelations that shaped you. And not everyone is equipped to hear it and still respect you. Some people hear your pain and instantly feel powerful over you. Others hear your truth and feel entitled to comment on your next steps. That's how your transparency turns into their judgment, not because your truth was flawed, but because their lens was. You've got to get comfortable being misunderstood by people who weren't meant to understand you in the first place. If they haven't carried the burden of becoming, they won't know how to honor your becoming either, and that's okay. Your truth doesn't lose value because someone else can't carry it. It just means you have to carry it with more discretion. There are parts of you that are still healing, still growing, still evolving, and those parts are not public property. Just because something is true doesn't mean it's ready to be shared. Some truths require time. Some require discernment, and some require complete silence until you're strong enough to share them without bleeding on people who didn't cut you. You don't need to prove your transparency to be powerful. Real power doesn't come from what you reveal, it comes from what you master in private. And when you know who you are, you stop needing others to validate your journey. You realize not everyone deserves access to the deepest parts of you. Not because you're hiding, but because you're healing. There are people who will only ever see you through the lens of who you used to be. And the moment you share your truth, they'll try to drag you back to a version of yourself you outgrew. That's why boundaries are protection, not just from others, but from regression. Sharing your truth with someone who doesn't respect your growth will always leave you feeling smaller than you really are. There are also people who simply aren't ready for your truth because your clarity disrupts their confusion. Your light exposes their shadows. Your boldness threatens their comfort. And so, they reject not just your story, they reject you. But don't shrink because of their discomfort. Don't hide because of their immaturity. Let that rejection be your redirection. Not everyone is supposed to walk with you at this level, and not everyone should have a front row seat to your healing. There is wisdom in withholding. There is strength in silence, and there is peace in privacy. When you stop handing your truth to people who can't hold it, you stop bleeding unnecessarily. You start protecting your energy. You start preserving your peace, and you start moving in a way that honors the sacredness of your own story. Your truth is not for entertainment. It is not for manipulation. It is not for approval. It is for your freedom, your alignment, your breakthrough. And only those who have proven their ability to respect that weight should be invited into that space. So speak with purpose, not pressure. Share from healing, not hurt. And always remember, just because it's your truth doesn't mean it belongs to the world. It belongs first to you. Carry it wisely, guard it fiercely, and never forget. The right people will never be intimidated by the weight of your truth. They'll be honored to hold space for it. Silence is more than the absence of sound. It's the presence of control. When you choose silence, you are choosing restraint in a world that rewards reaction. You are choosing focus when the world pressures you to perform. Silence isn't just stillness, it's self-mastery. And self-mastery is what separates the scattered from the successful, the distracted from the disciplined, the average from the anointed. Discipline isn't built in the noise. It's forged in quiet places where the world isn't watching and the applause is nowhere to be found. In silence, you come face to face with your own mind. No filters, no distractions, no audience. And in that raw space, you start to learn who's really in charge, your spirit or your impulses. You start to see how much of your energy has been wasted on talking about things instead of doing them, explaining yourself instead of mastering yourself. When you get comfortable in silence, you stop needing to be understood. And that's the first sign of real growth, because immature minds crave explanation. Mature minds crave elevation. When you learn to keep quiet even when you're misunderstood, you begin to develop something most people never will: emotional discipline. You stop reacting out of insecurity and start responding out of alignment. Silence forces you to sit with yourself. It forces you to confront your habits, your patterns, your triggers. That discomfort is what most people run from. But the disciplined lean into it, because they know the silence is where the sharpening happens. It's where clarity is born. It's where you stop asking for direction and start becoming the direction. Discipline isn't always about doing more. Often it's about saying less, about resisting the urge to speak when silence would serve you better, about holding your peace when chaos calls your name. When you practice silence, you're not just avoiding noise, you're cultivating precision. You're sharpening your focus. You're choosing to act instead of talk, to move instead of announce. Every time you resist the temptation to overshare, overreact, or over-explain, you strengthen your discipline. You take control back from the parts of you that are still addicted to attention, still triggered by criticism, still looking for validation. Silence teaches you to keep your energy, to guard your power, to stop leaking progress for the sake of being seen. In silence, you train your inner world to be stronger than your outer circumstances. You learn to hear what matters and mute what doesn't. You learn that not everything requires a response. Not every opinion needs to be challenged. Not every attack deserves an answer. That is discipline, to know you could speak and still choose to be still. Most people confuse discipline with doing, but true discipline is in the not doing. It's in the pauses, the refusals, the boundaries. It's in the moment you choose to walk away instead of proving your point. In the moment you sit with a difficult feeling instead of dumping it onto someone else. In the moment you hold your tongue, not because you're weak, but because you're wise. Silence creates space, space for reflection, space for prayer, space for growth, space to hear what's really going on beneath the noise. If you never pause long enough to listen, you'll keep reacting to the surface while your soul starves for depth. Discipline requires awareness, and awareness can't thrive in a constantly noisy environment. Your destiny is too valuable to be drowned out by distraction, and silence is how you quiet the clutter. It's how you locate the signal in a world of static. It's how you remember what matters when everything is screaming for your attention. You don't build vision with noise, you build it with clarity, and clarity comes through silence. Silence also reveals how strong your habits really are. When no one is watching, when no one is cheering, when no one is validating your effort, will you still do the work? Will you still stay on course? Will you still honor your commitments? Discipline is proven not when it's easy, but when it's lonely, when it's quiet, when it's inconvenient. It's in the silence that the disciplined rise above the emotional. Where others are triggered, they are trained. Where others vent, they pause. Where others perform, they prepare. The disciplined don't live for applause. They live for results. And that mindset is cultivated in the quiet, not the crowd. You'll never meet a truly powerful person who hasn't mastered silence, because silence is the soil where discipline grows, where your reflexes are rewired, where your focus is sharpened, where your words gain weight because they're no longer thrown out carelessly. When you speak less, you start to mean more. When you pause before reacting, you respond with power. Silence isn't about being passive. It's about being strategic. It's about knowing your voice is a weapon and choosing not to use it carelessly. It's about becoming so rooted in self-control that nothing external can shake your internal. The more you train in silence, the stronger you become under pressure. The more you practice restraint, the more explosive your actions become, because they're backed by intention, not emotion. Silence is the training ground for giants. It's where your soul gets strong. It's where your mind gets clear. It's where your habits get tested and refined. Discipline isn't something you get. It's something you grow. And the environment that grows it best, silence. So when you choose not to respond, not to defend, not to broadcast, don't mistake that for weakness. That's strength under control. That's power being perfected. That's discipline taking root. And when it takes root, you become unshakable. Because you've trained in the one environment that most people run from, the quiet.